Coming up, and real quick, I got to get an update on what happened last night at an SB5 meeting, just so we understand where it's going, whether you support it or not. Rich Hoffman joins me now. Rich, you were at the one at Entertainment Junction.
Yes, correct. The one that Shannon Jones showed up at.
Yeah, give me the. First of all, how was it go? How was the turnout?
Turnout was somewhere between 200 and 300 people.
Okay,
maybe, maybe a little bit more than that. But yeah, it was quite full.
So did Shannon Jones spoke and she laid out her support for SB5, what's in it?
Yeah, she really, because I followed it pretty closely, and I didn't know what ended up in the final bill. I mean, we've talked about it a lot, and I've supported something. We've talked about SB5 being too aggressive, maybe, and hurting, stepping on some toes and all that kind of stuff. So really, I went there not really. I wanted to talk to her personally, kind of get a measure of her as a person, and what's behind the final bill, what ended up on the table, and what's what we're voting for, so I can really kind of gauge how much I wanted to support it. I mean, do I want to casually support it as the only option, or do I want to get behind it aggressively and support it?
So how did she do? Did she lay it out well?
I thought, my first thought from her was, this is not a polished politician. It took her probably 20 minutes to get to her point, which to me is kind of encouraging, because she didn't come out there with a bunch of razzle-dazzle. She hasn't been in that position very long, and she's only been in the House since 2007. She came out there very ordinary, and she kind of reminded me of when we all sit around and talk in the parking lots around the water coolers. We ought to do this, or why don't they do that? She sort of had that kind of air, an innocence about how things should work.
All right. So did anybody challenge her? Did anybody say, hey, listen, I got a real problem with this? Was there anybody that was a teacher, a firefighter, said, listen, this is really going to hurt me?
Yeah, there was a union president of the Cincinnati Public Schools. I think he was part of the maintenance group. Okay. That came there and challenged her in the Q&A session. I guess he expected to floor with, you're cutting into my rights. You're cutting into my, it's all feelings and, all the things we've heard about this issue. And he kind of, he tried to pin her down, which didn't work out too well, because surprisingly, she came up with like a 15-minute answer to his question that really laid it on the line. I thought she did an excellent job of conveying that.
But was her response, was it challenging? Was it adversarial? Or did she say, you're really going to be okay? Which...
Now, her thing is, you're misreading this. I know change is difficult, but you have to recognize that if we don't do something, that it's out of balance, and we have to balance it. Right now, you're in a system where you might be a good worker, but your union is protecting bad workers, and we have to find a way to manage that. And right now, we can't. And she went on quite long about that very issue.
So find a way to protect the people out there that are members of the union, because I don't think any of us want workers, in dangerous situation or screwed over, whether they're public or private. Right. So find a way to protect them, but also try to get rid of those bad workers, or have the ability to.
Right. Yeah, and that's the measure of the whole thing. I really didn't come out. I expected there to be more aggression, a little more, anxiety. The bill, as it sounds like it came out extremely fair. I hate to say that.
More beneficial to union members, less offensive to them than maybe they think?
Oh, much less offensive. But I guess what it comes down to is it's not an attack on unions. Unions are going to be still legal. They're still allowed to collectively bargain, all that stuff. It really, what's in it with this Senate Bill 5, or Issue 2, which is what it now is, what it really does is it eliminates the monopoly power of the union. It puts them at a fair shake at the table with the people that we elect to represent management.
Did you record this last night?
Yeah, I did. I recorded it. I think my video is still rendering. It's been rendering. I did it in high def, so it takes forever on my computer to make it work. I will have it up sometime today, and I will send you a copy of that.
Yeah, when you send me a link, what I'll do is I'll put it on my blog, the link to it, so people can go there and see for themselves. I'm sure on both sides of the argument, people are really interested in what's in there, because toward the end it got really questionable because it changed a whole bunch. All right, Rich Hoffman, I appreciate you joining me, sir.
All righty, I'll see you. I'll send that to you when I get it.
Yeah, please do. Thank you so much. Well, it's good to go and check out, and he's going to send it to me sometime today, so maybe check later tonight or by tomorrow. I'll let you know tomorrow if it is in fact up.
We will continue to monitor that situation as we go forward. But another situation that requires monitoring is a situation with Ohio's still new governor, Governor John Kasich, who now wants a deal to, to rethink Senate Bill 5, SB5. Joining me now with the latest on this and his thoughts on SB5 and I guess the what is now is issue 2, Sheriff Jones of Butler County. I guess it's now issue 2 that the voters are going to be voting on. Is that correct?
Well, see, I thought you were talking about Senate Bill 5.
Senate Bill 5, and I think the issue to repeal it is going to be issue 2 if it gets to the ballot.
If it gets to the ballot. Well, yeah. With the collective bargaining agreement, which the bill that the governor passed, what he's done is the reason he wants to blank, he's actually blanked. And I'm a conservative Republican. I've not liked the way it's been done. Now what he's done is he's made all the policemen, the firemen, the school teachers, all government workers the enemy. And he's down by 20 points. It's going to get repealed. 20 percentage points. It's going to get repealed.
Well, Sheriff Jones, as a conservative, this governor who ran as a conservative, since he's been in office, he's done any number of things that go against the conservative grain. That rubs conservatives the wrong way.
I've met this guy. He come in. Senator Seitz is down in the Hamilton County. Great guy. He was on the subcommittee that was going to vote this to go out. He was going to vote against it. He's the one that the government workers they trust. So what did the governor do? Had him fired. Had him kicked off the committee, and because he wasn't going to vote with him. And so now they've got all this together. They got the House Speaker Batchelder said today that it was the wrong bill to do. It was the wrong way to put it together. And here we are, and him and this Niehaus guy, that's the president of the Senate and the governor. Now they want to do a last-minute negotiation to change this. And hey, I fully understand what they should do is they should get Senator Seitz back involved with this. That's the only one that the government workers trust.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the enemy. They're not. Since when have school teachers and policemen and firemen become the enemy?
Well, Seitz spent a lot of hours on these airwaves, giving his thoughts on Senate Bill 5, and Kasich, he came into office, and this was his first bullet out of the chamber, and there was a lot of bashing going on between the governor and the heads of the unions, and that was a pretty brutal fight. And this thing, he went ahead and signed this bill and pretty much said in your face. But now, with a Quinnipiac poll that came out in July showing 56% of Ohioans surveyed favor the repeal of SB5, and only 32% favor retaining SB5. It's as if he's seeing the writing on the wall. And
sure.
And I've never seen a move like this where you have such bravado signing a bill like this, and then a couple of months later you come back and say, okay, now we're ready to sit down and renegotiate.
Well, the reason is he's going to have to spend $20 million to try to get this bill passed, and it's still going to fail. That's all. Where I went to school, that's almost 60% of the population. If you round it up, it's almost 60% are going to repeal this.
That's kind of like a landslide number, isn't it?
It's not even close. And they're going to spend $20 million. My party is to try to get this bill passed. Then they're going to come right behind it in 2012, and we're going to try to get a Republican-elected president of the United States. And all he's going to do is divide the Republican Party. It's the Republican Party fighting with one part of the Republican Party. They got it. The only people that are going to listen to, they got to get Seitz back involved in this. I understand the whole process.
Well, they got to get Seitz back involved before Friday, because Friday is supposed to be the meeting. And right now, the head of these unions are saying you can go pound sand, because they've got the momentum on their side, and they're saying we're not getting anywhere near that negotiating table.
Nope, don't blame them a bit. I fully understand. And what they need to do, though, to get this done right, they just need to do away with this, get it off the ballot, come back in the fall, renegotiate. Seitz has to be the one. They've spit in his face. And here he's one of the most brilliant people that I've ever known. He's an attorney, works for a prestigious law firm. And what they do, they booted him out because he wasn't marching with them. And the American people are so fed up with this stuff. Sit down and negotiate. For one whole year of the governor's governorship, all it's done has been decisive and fighting with each other. And now he's getting ready to go into, he's going to show how strong he is, just like the governor in Wisconsin. And look what happened there.
Well,
the recalls.
I mean, this doesn't look good for this governor. Yeah, I've never seen a move like this where if the voters go ahead and decide to repeal this thing, then why can't he just let the chips fall where they may?
Hey, I suppose that he's going to try to spend $20 million of money, and I don't know where that all money comes from, for a losing battle. And then you're going to have people lined up in 2012, and it's just that whoever he listens to and he gets his advice. When you listen to Batchelder, he sounded like he didn't want it. If you look at what was reported, said in the paper, he said it was a terrible thing to do, shouldn't have been done that way, and now we've got everybody fighting with everybody. And hell, if we have any government employees, you have to realize government employees pay taxes just like everybody else.
Well, sure they do. But Sheriff Jones, we're running out of time. Let me ask you this. You can look at this thing from both sides. So on one hand, the governor is saying, look, the local municipalities, the townships, they need to have more control over how they can allocate their dollars. I mean, really, the precious few dollars that they have, they need to have more control instead of being locked in to these union agreements that go on for years and years and years and show no signs of slowing down and are threatening to bankrupt some of the cities and towns all across Ohio. So how do you reconcile those two things hey, you have to have the ability to control that spending, but then on the other hand, you don't want to screw over the hardworking Americans who have these jobs.
But you do. It's up to the townships. It's up to the county commissioners. It's up to the councils. It's up to the trustees. What they got to do is you got to say no, and you got to. But what they do is they cave and they give in. That's all that does. I've went to arbitration. I've been to arbitration on both sides. I do well in arbitration, and and nobody says that the system doesn't need to be fixed. But you don't throw everybody under the bus. And what do you think is going to happen when the cities and municipalities have the authority to negotiate contracts and make these decisions? Guess what? They do now. They choose not to. But you know why? They don't want it. They're afraid they'll get unelected. Do you think that's going to change? It's not going to change. They cave to the pressure. All he's doing is passing it down and taking the pressure off himself and throwing it down on the townships and the cities and the counties. They already do that. They already negotiate the contracts for these people. And you have to realize a lot of these unions, for the government workers, a lot of them are non-union. Not all of them are union employees. And they choose to cave to the pressure. It's called negotiations. It works.
All right. Well,
they've made enemies out of all these people. It's sad, really.
Well,
isn't it sad?
It's I've never seen a situation like this before, and I know everyone that from teachers to firefighters to police officers are just so bent out of shape about this. The ones that I know personally, I mean, they're shocked. Yeah, they've been walking around. They've been walking around in a daze for the last 6 months.
Well, the school system isn't the fault of the teachers. The school system's the fault of everybody from the top to the bottom to the parents. The teachers only have them a certain time period. I've had good teachers and I've had bad teachers. There's bad and good in everything that you do in life. But you can't just punish everybody. And again, remember what I told you. The school boards can negotiate what they like to negotiate. They choose not to. It's not going to change that at all.
Well, Sheriff Jones,
have to have the guts.
We got to run, but before we go, I know you guys are stepping up the effort to look for drunk drivers in the days and weeks ahead. Is that right?
Yes, sir. In August is the 12,000 people killed each year in the United States to drunk or impaired drivers. 12,000 a year, and Butler County is one of the in the top 10 as far as impaired drivers and crashes involving drunks or driving drugged. Totally out of control. We're trying to make more arrests, and we're trying to educate people, and we're going to let them know. We're going to be out in enforcement for the rest of the year, but in the month of August, for the next 2 weeks, us and the local law enforcement agencies in Butler County and around the state, we're all going to be working on it. So if you're drinking and driving or driving impaired, hey, you're going to get a little taste of jail, period.
All right. Sheriff Richard Jones of Butler County, thank you so much for calling in. We've got to run, and we'll check in with you later and tell Steve Vaughn I said hello.
Hey, remember, Senator Sykes is the only guy that can save this. I'll let you go.
All right. Time for a break. We'll get with Denny and Dayton and your phone calls at 749-7000, 1-800-THE-BIG-ONE, and pound 700 on AT&T. Dan Carroll in for Bill Cunningham on the Big One, 700 WLW. 1250 on the Big One, 700 WLW. Dan Carroll in for Bill Cunningham. coming up at 3 o'clock, Sloaney and Tracy. Why would you buy a home near a dump and then think you have a right to a lawsuit? Stupid people, stupid lawyers with Sloaney and Tracy starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon on 700 WLW. Let's go to Dayton and talk to Denny. And, Denny, what do you have to say about paying taxes?
Well, the problem I've got is the sheriff needs to read a little Milton Friedman because he's addressed this. When you talk about government employees paying taxes, the problem with that in terms of a tax base is they're paying it with taxpayers' money. So it's sort of like bailing a boat by scooping the water out of the bow and throwing it in the stern. It's a net sum zero.
Well, you're right about that. And, what the whole argument that I tend to agree with on this issue is that when you have a government employees union, okay, and who do they negotiate? They negotiate with the elected leaders of the government, be it a city council or be it the board of commissioners in a county, or be it on a national level. Okay,
exactly.
They essentially negotiate with Congress, and they're negotiating against the taxpayers.
And
there's really not two sides in that negotiation.
And they're too often negotiating with people whom they got elected and who want to seek, because the unions are something like 14 out of top 20 donators in campaign funds are unions. 14 out of 20. And so they're the ones getting these people elected, and if they want funding for their campaign, they don't want to irritate the unions. I mean, Ted Strickland was a real good example of that. And where were all these people complaining when Strickland was in there and on these school construction projects? He had all those project labor agreements that banned non-union workers from even participating at all.
Well, the one thing that Sheriff Jones did say is that you have to, as an elected leader, you have to learn how to say no. You have to learn how to say no to these outrageous demands that get made on some of these union contracts. And a public sector job is one of the sweetest jobs you can have when you talk about your vacation and your time off and your sick days and your health benefits and all the other fringes that go along with working a public sector job, and the fact that you can't get fired. You can't get fired unless you embezzle money or you kill someone, I guess. And then then you might not even be able to be fired.
The federal courts and their rulings, when the unions have tried numerous times and lost, about collective bargaining being a right for the public sector, their ruling has been that they have undue access to the elected people because of their campaign, and therefore, like you say, they aren't negotiating with the taxpayers. So that's why the courts have ruled the way they have. So when they say collective bargaining is a right, no, it's not. The courts have consistently said it's not.
Well, Denny and Dayton, you're making a whole bunch of sense this afternoon.
All right.
And we can only have so much of that.
Well, Kasich blew it politically in the way they did this. I agree with.
Oh, it's an absolute mess.
But they just I can't believe it.
It's an absolute. He's seeing the writing on the wall and saying, maybe we can change this before the voters have their say.
Yeah.
It's not looking good. All right,
yeah.
Denny, that's all I need. Time for another break on the big one, 700 WLW. 1227, the home of the Reds. Dan Carroll in for Bill Cunningham. Talking about SB5 and the governor trying to, I guess make a last-minute deal to avoid a vote on this. Rich Hoffman, how are you?
Hey, I'm fantastic. I heard Sheriff Jones on here, and I had to reply.
What do you have to say to Sheriff Jones?
Oh, I think the Sheriff Jones does a great job of managing his district or managing his people, his particular department, but he is very much removed from what you typically get when you're talking about government workers handling contracts. It's so messed up. When you have situations where you can't even get public employees to negotiate on paying $5 more for their health care benefits, and they threaten to strike and walk out on, like in the teachers' cases, you can't even deal with those people. And I don't want to apologize for Kasich. I'm personally disappointed that he's actually going to change. We tell him to sit down and talk, and he didn't sit down and talk. He went ahead and did this because he knew there was going to be opposition.
Rich, here's the thing, and I think that this distinction needed to be made loud and clear during the debate, that the majority of people, I think the vast majority of people who pay taxes have no problem with the money that teachers make, that firefighters make, that police officers make. Right. All these people in the public sector are grossly underpaid for what they do and the services that they provide. But then on the other hand, like Sheriff Jones said, these elected leaders have to learn how to say no. And over the years, union leadership has gotten away with too much when it comes to negotiating these contracts, and it's going to bankrupt these cities and towns.
Yeah, they ran the table, and how do you change that culture? I mean, that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about a culture change here. I mean, it's a complete reversal. We can't go down this path. And this whole idea of unionized workers that are in a public sector is an experiment. I mean, it's been 40, 50 years down the road, and we see where it's headed.
Well, Rich Hoffman, we have to run, but thank you so much for calling in. John Kasich, he blew this one coming right out the gate. So what's going to happen tomorrow when they're trying to have this meeting to negotiate something on SB5, we will have to wait and see. Coming up after the news at the top of the hour, we're going to talk with Mark Miller of Coast and see how excited he is about the streetcar signs that have been posted in downtown Cincinnati. Time for the news at the home of the Reds. News Radio 700 WLW Cincinnati.
Doc Thompson at 700 WLW. Get a quick call in. Oh, Rich Hoffman joins me now. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm fantastic. I couldn't just sit back and listen to this discussion without weighing something in.
Yeah, and by the way, real quick, I put Rich's video from night before last where Senator Shannon Jones spoke at Entertainment Junction about SB5 and that. I put it up on my blog at 700WLW.com.
Yeah, there's a little reverb, and you kind of have to kind of pay attention to what's being said because it sounded like it did there, but it's a political speech, but if you really want to know the issues and you want to hear from the author, it's you sit down and watch it, and no spin at all, just how she presented and her thoughts. So I thought it was pretty interesting. But in relation to the other calls that I've heard so far, where some of these folks are calling in and talking about it's not fair that everyone gets paid the same and all that kind of thing. I think the most significant piece of this legislation, the part that survived all the revisions, was the fact that it allows people to decide whether they want to be in a union or not. I think that's the biggest thing in it, is it actually makes it a choice. And you shouldn't be obligated by law to be in a union if you want to be a teacher.
That makes perfect sense to me. That would be my frustration, even if I supported the union and liked him or whatever, is the force to join. I don't like forced in. I prefer freedom and people to be able to make choices.
Yeah, there's a lot of teachers that have come up with various these different. They've called it. They don't like to be stuck in this situation where they're required to be in it. They'd like to be paid on their performance, and they simply are frustrated and they want out of it. And this gives them that ability.
What else did Shannon have to say about it?
About that part of it,
yeah.
Well, I mean, she didn't talk that much about it because the thing is, they get in this defensive mode where you talk about the binding arbitration and who's going to do that, who decides this and that, and the whole pension issue and who's going to be involved with the pension. How much do you contribute? Is it going to be 15% or 31% like it's in the private sector? All that kind of stuff. And that's what she focused on. But I kind of thought, I didn't know if it was going to make it in the final legislation or not, but it did. The fact that it's going to be, it's free. You can be in the union if you want to be. If you don't want to be, then you don't have to be. And I think that's what the real threat is really it's the union dues that they have their mind on. And it kind of makes it unpredictable as to how much income will come in. Because if you're guaranteed every teacher, every public employee is going to have to pay union dues, then you kind of know what your income is going to be and how much you have to fight and help manipulate legislation. And when you throw that variable in there, it makes it very difficult. And that's the thing. But no employee should be compelled to be in something they don't want to be, just like with health care. You shouldn't be compelled to buy something that you don't want.
Well, now, this is a part of the problem. That's the reason I asked what else you had to say about it, because there's so many pieces to this, and there's some things that people say, yeah, I can agree with that, or I can't. You've got some serious safety concerns and whatever if you're, a firefighter, a police officer, something like that. But then the argument for the union members, wait a minute, if you don't have to join the union, then and pay the dues, you shouldn't enjoy any of the spoils, anything they've done on your behalf, because otherwise, right, I just won't pay into it and I get all the benefits. Precisely.
But I didn't even know if it made it through all those legislative phases, but it did. And I asked her there, is this real? I mean, is that a fact? And she said, yes, that's one of the things that we thought was most important in the bill. But it really didn't get talked about in her speech. It wasn't something that everybody focused on, but I think it's probably the most significant part of the legislation that probably has the most fear in the unions, why they protested and are so angry about it, because it creates a variable that they're not really, they don't want to have to deal with, because they manipulate things in mass. So you have to have mass. Whether all the members are really truly believing in the cause or not is irrelevant. It's the dollars that help them, create that. And if they're really providing such a great service, they shouldn't be afraid. The membership would be lucrative. But they are afraid of it because there's quite a few people who do want to opt out of it and want to be paid based on their merit and what they actually create.
All right, it's Rich.
Themselves.
All right, it's Rich Hoffman, and I put, like I said, a link to your video from the other night up on my blog. Thanks, man.
All right.
Have yourself a great day. It's Doc Tops at 700 WL. It's very, very sad. It's very, very sad that our president has been downgraded to bus travel. I remember when I was a kid, the president used to fly on an airplane. That's probably what you'll say. I remember when he used to fly. That's how bad the economy is. The president has to travel by bus. It's very, very sad. Well, if somebody tells you they're going on a trip and they're like, yeah, our bus leaves at, oh, you're going on a bus, huh? Oh, kind of feel bad for them, right? Oh, you couldn't afford to fly. I mean, even if they're only doing it because they don't like to fly, you couldn't afford to fly. Yeah. It's pretty sad. The president traveling via bus travel. Via bus. He is wrapping up his Midwestern bus tour. And I ran out of time. I still got to get to the names of his tour. Those coming up. Coming up at 10:06, we're going to talk about double dipping with Commissioner Greg Hartman. He's going to lay it out for you. You can decide for yourself, you think double dipping's a good thing or a bad thing. On one hand, people have paid into it. On the other hand, are they making so much? And this should be of particular interest and concern to union members. Well, because when we're dealing with all the money that we spend in the public sector, you're usually at the front of this. But a lot of times it's those administrators, your bosses, are the ones really sucking up the dough. Are they making too much? Are their perks too high? We'll find out next. The home of the Reds, 700 WL.